Today we're going to talk about reptiles. So if we think back to what we discussed about evolution of these different types of vertebrates, reptiles evolved from what group? Yeah, from amphibians. And so there are a bunch of different adaptations that evolved in reptiles that allowed them, because what's the main distinction? Or what were reptiles able to do that amphibians could not? You think about their evolution.
They could live fully on land.
Yes, they could live their entire life on land and be able to survive. Whereas amphibians always require the water at least for what? For reproduction. Reptiles have some adaptations that allow them to take reproduction and move it away from the water. Okay. So, what are reptiles? Like, what are some examples of reptiles? Because sometimes people confuse some of the reptiles and amphibians. Emily?
A lizard.
Yeah, lizards are reptiles. Bella?
Turtle.
Turtles.
Snake.
Snakes. Another big group we're missing. Alex? Alligators and crocodiles. Yeah. Those are all examples of reptiles. So one of the adaptations that helped reptiles be able to live their lives fully on land is their body covering. What is a reptile's body covered in? Hannah?
Scales.
Yeah, they have a body covered in scales. How is it that scales are helpful to life on land? Yeah?
To keep it from like sucking all the water out of it.
Yeah, so an amphibian with thin skin could easily dehydrate because that skin is permeable to water and it can dry up pretty easily. Reptiles, however, have scales which are basically prevent them from losing water quickly. And so this is why we can have reptiles that live in the desert, okay, where it's very dry. So that's one important adaptation to life on land. What about reptiles' body temperature? Does anybody know? Anywhere?
Cold-blooded.
They're also cold-blooded. Again, we don't see a lot of snakes around this time of the year here. Because what are they doing? They're hibernating. They're in the ground in a burrow somewhere, hibernating. They are not active at this temperature. Reptiles are cold-blooded. Now, reptiles do not regulate their body temperature internally, but they do have certain behavioral adaptations that allow them to adjust their body temperature. If you ever have visited a state like Florida, where they have lots of those little anole lizards, you know what I'm talking about?
Geckos.
Yeah, the little green ones. So how many people have been to Florida and seen those? Where do you find them in the morning? Alex?
In like the morning, you find them on trees and bushes until like sun reaches when you go out.
Yeah, you find them maybe on the sidewalk, clinging to like the screen on a door or something, in a tree holding on the side. What are they doing there? Why would they put themselves in those places in the morning? Tyler? Yeah, they're basically warming up their body temperature. Because their body temperature depends on their surroundings, by moving into a place that's called basking. And going in a sunny place, their body temperature is rising so they can become more active. What about in the very strong heat of the day? You probably don't see them at all. Or if you do, where would they go?
The shade.
Yeah, in the shade, in the water, underneath some leaves. So they will go and cool themselves down if their body temperature is getting too high. So they don't regulate it internally like we do, but they do have some behaviors that allow them to help regulate their body temperature. Now, in amphibians, where did fertilization take place? Externally where? In the water. Okay. Males release sperm into the water. The sperm cells have to swim to the egg cells to fertilize them, that happen in the water. Reptiles developed an adaptation that allowed them to reproduce on land. So the way they did that is through internal fertilization. So reptiles are the first group of vertebrates that have internal fertilization. What this means is that males and females mate, and males deposit sperm cells in the female's reproductive tract. And so those sperm cells make their way to an egg cell internally, inside of the female's body. So that's internal fertilization. So that's because they don't require water for reproduction. It happens inside. Once fertilization has happened, an egg forms, but it's a different type of egg from fish or amphibians. What were the eggs of fish and amphibians like? Connor?
They were like clear.
Clear, sort of jelly-like, just a thin outer membrane. That would not work very well for reproducing on land. Those types of eggs would immediately just dry out and not be able to survive. So reptiles developed a shell around their eggs that is basically waterproof. So you have this shell, and inside, that's where you have your watery environment for the embryo to grow, inside of this shell. So reptiles lay their eggs on land, and they're able to do that because of this waterproof shell. It keeps the embryo moist by surrounding it in this shell. Now, reptile eggs are different from bird eggs. Has everyone ever picked up the shell of a reptile egg? Sometimes if you're hiking, you might find turtle eggs on the side near a pond or a lake that have hatched. If you pick them up, they're not hard and brittle like a bird egg. They're more flexible. They're often described as a leathery egg. So the eggs develop externally. So they have internal fertilization, but then external development of the embryo. Here you see turtle laying eggs. Turtles lay their eggs on land, usually near the water. And then often after they hatch, those turtles return back to the water to grow.
Don't they bury their eggs?
Yeah, a lot of turtles bury their eggs. The young hatch, then come out of the sand, especially sea turtles, and then they make their way down into the water to go live their lives. In terms of circulation, amphibians had what kind of heart? How many chambers? Three. Fish had 2. Amphibians had 3. Reptiles have what we call a 3.5 chamber heart. Which is kind of weird. This is the diagram of an amphibian heart. So again, you have an atrium on top, and then you have the ventricle. But if you look here, it's partially divided. It's not fully split into 2 separate chambers, but it partially is. And this allows for better separation of oxygenated, deoxygenated blood. It's not full 4-chambered heart that we're going to see in birds and mammals, but it's pretty close. Reptiles also go through a process of molting. They don't have an exoskeleton, they have scales, but they shed those scales periodically. Probably seen this maybe a zoo or someplace. You might see a snake and it has shed its outer layer of scales. So they do molt. Reptiles are carnivores. Snakes are interesting. They can eat prey that's even much larger than their body. They have several adaptations that allow them to do that. We'll talk about those maybe a little tomorrow. I'll have a video I want to show you about an egg-eating snake. But we're going to stop here. That's all our notes on reptiles, but I want to show you a couple of these videos.